So this workshop is funded by Professional Services Advancement Support Scheme, Hong Kong SAR Department, Hong Kong SAR Government, and sponsored by Golden Resources. We also have a number of collaborating and supporting organizations. So obviously this workshop is blessed by many people, and many people are actually very interested in this kind of topic about how Hong Kong professional services practitioners can go out and explore opportunities in the Belt and Road countries. Particularly this time we will be focusing on Sri Lanka. So without further ado, I will just invite, we have 5 speakers today, and each speakers will be sharing their experiences for 10 minutes, and then we will have 10 minutes for immediate clarifications or quick questions. And after that, we will have a panel discussion. So if the presentation will last longer than 10 minutes, then we will have shorter immediate question sections, but then I hope everything will go well. So without further ado, may I just invite the first speakers, Ms. Sabasini Apasingpi from Vertical Research Center. She is the research director of the center, of the research center. And Sabasini is an economist specializing in international trade. She's an expert on Sri Lankan economy, private sector development, economic and trade policy, trade regulations, non-tariff barriers, trade facilitations, WTO and regional trade agreements. She has a bachelor's degree in economics and a master's degree also in economics from University of Colombo, and a master's degree in international law and economics from World Trade Institute, University of Bern, Switzerland. Sabasini is currently working, as I mentioned already, as the director of research at Radical Research, and which is a research and strategy firm based in Colombo. She has worked also for the Ceylon's Chamber of Commerce for nearly 10 years as a senior economist. Today, she will be sharing with us about her experience and her views about trade policy in Sri Lanka, provide us with a macro background. So, Sabasini, are you here?
Yes, I am Linda.
Hi.
Hello. Good morning to you, everyone.
I'm passing the time to you now.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity given to share my thoughts. Linda, is it possible for me to share my screen?
Your screen has not yet been shown.
Okay. Yeah, well, let me see. I think I should be able to. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's coming. Great, perfect.
Yeah, great, okay. So since cross-border trade is an important area for any business person who wants to do business with another country, I thought maybe at this forum it may be useful for me to share my own thoughts about factors that shape and influence trade policy in Sri Lanka, so that businesses are better able to understand the risks as well as opportunities that await them when they are doing business in Sri Lanka. So since I have 10 minutes, I'll try to cover quickly some key points, and then if there are any questions, happy to answer during the panel discussion. So Sri Lanka does not have a comprehensively articulated and documented trade policy, which has been a subject of discussion for quite some time now, saying that lack of such a trade policy is what creates a significant amount of instability, especially as politics, as the government's transition from one party to the other, and there must be some overarching trade policy for the country. But however, making of this trade policy has not been very easy. The discussions and debates indicate that this remains quite polarized what Sri Lanka's trade policy should be. People seem to have very divergent opinions on the subject. So to this date, we really don't have a trade policy documented and approved by the government or the parliament. So trade policy in that sense will have to be drawn out from the overall economic policy and various sectoral policies, which can be quite volatile and maybe difficult also to navigate for anyone who is working in Sri Lanka, who wants to work in Sri Lanka. But I thought, instead of like looking at the trade policy, there are overarching factors that generally tends to influence and shape trade policy discussions in Sri Lanka. Understanding them may be useful and valuable to businesses. So, and some of these may not be uniquely Sri Lankan. I'm sure these factors play out in any other country when they're doing trade policy as well. So I identified three factors: twin deficits, which is more a macroeconomic environment and macroeconomic challenges the country faces that can be a source of instability of trade policy in Sri Lanka. And when I mean trade policy, I look at taxation, regulations, as well as trade negotiations with other countries. And secondly, I guess in any country, domestic industry plays an important role in trade policy making. And then public sentiments and perceptions, whether public sentiments favor a certain policy and whether there is, whether it's popular with the people or unpopular with the people, is also very important for the governments when they are forging ahead with introducing a new policy or changing an existing policy. So just to talk about the twin deficits, what do I mean by twin deficits? This is the fiscal deficit of a country and a trade deficit of a country. In Sri Lanka, the fiscal deficit and the trade deficit tends to be very closely linked. And as a result, basically instability or problems in one fiscal policy or fiscal deficit tends to spill over and affect the trade policy. So just to give you some context, Sri Lanka's fiscal position, Sri Lanka is in a challenging fiscal position. One of the biggest problems that identified in Sri Lanka is its very low tax base. It has very low tax revenue, and you can see in comparison to other countries where Sri Lanka stands. And as a result of lower government revenue compared to many other peers in the region, Sri Lanka has historically recorded higher fiscal deficits, leading to higher levels of debt. And why should this matter for trade policy? I hope my next slide will shed some insight. It matters because although Sri Lanka is a middle income economy, unfortunately, Sri Lanka heavily depends on its import-based taxes to collect its media tax revenue. And this is the source of, this is why the fiscal policy and fiscal deficits can become a source of instability for the trade policy. And here, when I say 49%, what it shows really is not just the taxes exclusively imposed on international trade, but also domestic taxes like the value-added tax collected from imports. But what is important to understand is that Sri Lanka depends significantly on imports for its tax revenue. And so if you're basically working in or doing business in any product sector that is highly revenue sensitive, then you need to, you could experience more instability in the trading environment and taxation than if you're in a sector that is not very highly revenue sensitive. So these are some of the sectors that are generally revenue sensitive. And you would, if you look at the history of Sri Lanka's taxation, you would see motor vehicles is one of the area where the trade policy or the tax policy and the regulations around imports have shown significant amount of instability. This is because for Sri Lanka, when the fiscal deficit expands, you need to bring more revenue. And a faster and easier way to bring revenue is to let your trade deficit expand so that you relax imports and you let imports come in and generate revenue. But when you relax imports, then your trade deficit expands. And then if you try to curtail that, then it will cost your fiscal deficit because your revenue will take a hit, right? So this is just one example that shows how in 2019 and 2020, a lot of restrictions around motor vehicle imports affects government revenue. But at the same time, the government has balance of payment problems that they need to deal with. And as a result, it's difficult for them to allow the trade deficit to expand. But in return, you have to take a hit on your fiscal deficit. And this is partly because Sri Lanka has introduced many reforms, has made many attempts under a lot of IMF agreements with the IMF even to expand its domestic tax base and improve its domestic tax collection, but somehow it has not been very successful. And as a result, until that problem fixed, you may notice that in certain revenue sensitive items, you may experience a certain amount of instability. And this is just, then the second one, of course, is the domestic industry. If you're trading in a product that is obviously domestic industry sensitive, and this is equally important for even professional services, if you're in a services sector where domestic industry feels that, you know, foreign players are a threat or can take away market share, obviously that becomes an important area of tension. And what is important to understand is a lot of this graph. This is a graph I like because this is where I disagree with some of the academics who think Sri Lanka's para-tariffs are really motivated. Or, okay, I think I will reduce my, sorry. I think something happened. Can you see my screen still? Hello?
No, this is the end of the slide. Maybe you want to go back.
Yeah, I will share it again, right? Let me share it again. Can you see it now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, cool. So a lot of people might say that Sri Lanka's revenue problem, para-tariffs are really motivated and driven by domestic industry interests, and it shows the trend of Sri Lanka going back to protectionism. Yes, Sri Lanka overall has definitely increased its level of protection, but this graph is interesting to me. I feel like Sri Lanka has attempted trade liberalization that is shown by that yellow line, which shows the import tax duties. But as a result, Sri Lanka has been losing revenue. It has been getting from import taxes. But at the same time, somehow the reforms the country introduced to improve its domestic tax collection over the years has not been very successful, forcing the government to some extent impose para-tariffs to recover the lost revenue. So Sri Lanka has somehow tried to maintain its import tariff bans at 3 or 4 levels. Even now it's 0, 15, and 30, 0 at most raw materials, 15% for intermediate products, and 30% for final products. But what has happened is, on top of that, Sri Lanka has been introducing para-tariffs, and these are taxes, other types of taxes, import cess being quite popular. And one would notice a trend to move from ad valorem taxes. So we all know the world is encouraging countries to have ad valorem taxes, charge tax as a percentage of your import expenditure. But increasingly, the para-tariffs of Sri Lanka has come in the form of unit taxes, that you are actually taxing quantity. Unit taxes definitely give higher levels of protection for the domestic industry, but really, when it was first introduced, it came as a way to safeguard government revenue from possible crashes, commodity price crashes. At one time, I can very well remember the government had experienced significant erosion of its taxes simply because the world prices of some of the key products have declined drastically. And if your tax base is ad valorem, then obviously the hit on revenue is very high. And this can be prevented if you actually go to a unit tax system because your volumes remain constant. So I think it's very important to understand some of these drivers, and these play when you want to also work on trade negotiations. So when in trade negotiations, you have to create, you think of defensive and offensive positions, right? What am I willing and able to liberalize, and what I want other countries to liberalize? When Sri Lanka considers its defensive position, what am I capable of liberalizing? What is important to note is that revenue considerations play an important role as well. can I liberalize these products and twin deficit plays an important role. One may argue even if you liberalize, of course, if you're going for zero duty is challenging. And even if you reduce taxes, the fear is on one hand, how would you manage this erosion of tax revenue without having a very good plan to recover that lost revenue from your domestic taxes? Then lastly, Linda, I hope I do have time. Have I run out of my 10 minutes?
Unfortunately, it's already like 12 minutes. So can you just...
Right, then maybe I can stop here and let other speakers speak. And when there is the panel discussion, I would like to go back to public sentiment and what an important role it plays in trade policy in Sri Lanka. Thank you, Linda.
Yeah, great, thank you. So we have like 7-8 minutes for immediate questions or clarifications. May I ask if anyone would have anything to ask to Sabasini about the trade policy in general in Sri Lanka? Yeah, sure.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. It's basically a question for clarification and a bit more information because, from what you speak and the slide, notice that a major point is that Sri Lanka's government revenue heavily dependent on imports, and imports base taxes accounted for 49% of total government revenue, right? So that is really a huge portion. So I wonder, it doesn't mean that doesn't mean that tariff itself is getting heavier and heavier, or does it mean the volume of imports has been very high and has been increasing over the years? So I'd like to hear a bit about that, and also, does it reflect, a dependence on
Sabasini, would you like to respond?
Yeah, actually, what is important notice is Sri Lanka can't afford to allow its imports to expand, because for the last 10 years, Sri Lanka's exports have stagnated around 10 to 11 billion, and its imports have stagnated around 19 to 20 billion US dollars. Definitely, Sri Lanka has not had the luxury of allowing its deficit to expand. It's already twice the exports. And even our tax revenue, Linda, has not improved, right? So that is one of the biggest problems in Sri Lanka. Across the years, Sri Lanka's tax revenue as a percentage of GDP has declined from around 20% to 11% today. So tax revenue has not expanded despite being dependent on imports. This is a source of a problem, because you can't allow imports to expand. So you keep on taxing imports at the rates usually, but you keep on fluctuating the rates just because instances where your fiscal deficit expands quite a lot, you try to recover some of that revenue by tweaking your taxes. That's what I said, there can be instability in the taxation. But a challenge is Sri Lanka is dependent on import taxes, and import tax revenue cannot be increased further without having significant repercussions on the trade deficit as well as on the overall economy. But at the same time, Sri Lanka has not been able to expand its domestic tax revenue, and as a result, Sri Lanka's tax to GDP ratio has significantly declined over the years. And this is a vulnerability the country has to overcome. No, it has not. And 49%, Linda, it's important. As I showed in that last slide, the basically exclusively taxes exclusively on imports account only for around 20% of total government revenue. Balance 30% comes from domestic taxes imposed or collected from imports. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, Sabasini. So we have like 4 more minutes. Chris?
Yes, I have a question. I think since the end of the civil war, the Sri Lanka role network has been improved, developing quite a lot. I'm involved in some highway constructions. That means that over the last more than 10 years, the length of highways has been substantially increased. Though the
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
The impact of the restriction for the vehicle with the high tax rate will affect the I repeat, the high in travel to the vehicle will probably causing restriction for the the transportation enhancement. So it will really also causing the economic growth impact. So is this a contradiction to the the economic growth of Sri Lanka? This high motor vehicle import tax?
True, but Sri Lanka taxes its vehicles at a very, very high rate. Vehicles are very expensive. So there is high demand for vehicles because Sri Lanka's public transport is not that great. So increasingly, people are resorting to purchasing private vehicles, even at very high prices. That is exactly what the government is exploiting, because it's a very what do you say, import price elasticity of imports for revenue is relatively high. So it's easy to tweak these taxes and increase demand and bring revenue within a shorter period of time. And that is why vehicle taxes are tweaked quite a lot. Personally, if you ask me, I am for higher taxes and I am for discouraging private vehicles and improving public transport for the country, because I think overall for economic growth, the real return for higher highways and transport networks come from very good improved public transport system, not by encouraging, especially for a small country like Sri Lanka, a lot of private vehicles on the road. Then it reverses the entire objective of having a proper transport system, because you're going to again have a lot of congestion, delays, inefficiency, pollution kicking in. So the country should actually, if it is to benefit from all these highway and road investments, they should really invest on a very good public transport system, both bus and rail. But somehow it has not been forthcoming, and which is why you see a very high level of private vehicles on the roads. And unfortunately, which means expansion of roads have not led to greater efficiency and reduction of time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the questions and also Sabasin's response. We also have one question in the chat box, but I think I will leave it to the panel discussions. I will take note of it. So let's move on to our second presentation by Mr. Tisa Wapamasengi, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Hambantota International Port Group. Tisa is a British qualified marine engineer. He served for 10 years as General Manager of South Asia Gateway Terminals, the first public-private partnership project of the Port of Colombo, and as a Director of Projects in the transport sector responsible for overseas port development business at Sri Lanka's leading conglomerate, John Kells Holdings. He then joined Colombo International Container Terminal, the second public-private partnership project between China Merchant Port Holdings and the Sri Lanka Port Authority in the Port of Colombo. And he has acquired the knowledge, skills, and working experiences in the technical and operational aspects of port management, as well as in marketing and commercial aspects. So he's also a fellow of the Institute of Marine Engineering, Science and Technology, and a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. Obviously, today we are going to learn a lot more from Tisa about port development in Colombo and in Sri Lanka in general. Tisa, please.
Morning, Linda, and thank you for that introduction. Given the tight time frame, I will go into the presentation straight away. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So the subject is port development in Sri Lanka. It's a tight subject to cover within a time frame of 10 minutes, but I shall do my best. So just to identify the 4 major ports in Sri Lanka, as Port of Colombo, Port of Galle, Port of Hambantota, and Port of Trincomalee. I will focus my presentation based on Port of Colombo and the Port of Hambantota. Just to give a brief on the Port of Colombo situation right now, it ranked 22nd in the world, 15th in global connectivity. And on the screen, what you see is the 2 harbor basins. One is the shallow basin and one is the deep water basin. What we call the old inner basin has 2 terminal operators. One is run by the Sri Lanka Ports Authority, which is a 100% government entity. The second one is a PPP partnership. It's called South Asia Gateway Terminals. That's JV between APMT and John Kilzer local company. On the other side, in the outer harbor, we have a new breakwater. Inside that breakwater, 3 terminals have been designed. As we speak, there is only 1 terminal in operation, which is the South Terminal. It's another PPP with a consortia. It started with a consortia of a local conglomerate, China Merchants, and then Sri Lanka Ports Authority. Right now, we are in a crunch situation as far as capacity is concerned, but we have about 12 million TEUs total capacity, which is about 50% increase in capacity lined up for the next 3 years. Going to Hambantota Port, that's a multi-purpose port built way back in construction started somewhere around 2007, completed in 2010-11. It was run by the Sri Lanka Ports Authority for a few years. Did not take off successfully as intended. Then they decided to go for a PPP, and now it's a PPP operation between the Sri Lanka Ports Authority and China Merchants Port Holdings. As at now, the business they are focusing is on ro-ro, break bulk, oil and gas. I will show you some numbers further down the presentation. So Sri Lanka, we try to draw a parallel as Sri Lanka with Hong Kong, being Hong Kong was the gateway to China as far as shipping or cargo connection was concerned. And Sri Lanka plays the same role with India. If you look at the demographics, Hong Kong with the populations are almost identical with 1.44 and 1.38 to 4. If you look at it in TEU terms, it's 184 TEUs per 1,000 people in China, and it's 12 TEUs per 1,000 people in India. So there again, you see the potential for growth in India. And we believe that Sri Lanka or all the ports in Sri Lanka would still continue to play a crucial role in supporting the gateway cargo of India, similar to what's happening in Hong Kong. India at the same time is developing their coastline with a variety of ports, but we believe Sri Lanka will still continue to play a complementary role to all those ports. I would like to spend some time on the PPP models that have been in place in Sri Lanka. The first PPP in the port industry started way back in late 90s, and that was the South Asia Gateway Terminals project, which was mooted by the then P&O Ports Group of Australia, together with a local conglomerate. That's a 30-year BOT. The government then advertised for the development of port capacity in Sri Lanka in the South Harbour, but other proposals are also welcome. Since there were no proposals for the outer harbour, the only proposal came for the development of an existing terminal inside the shallow water basin, and that was awarded to this the conglomerate or the consortia, including Piano Ports and the local company. That's a 30-year BOT. Then came along Colombo International Container Terminals. On my next slide, I'll show you the progress of how that really took place. But that was CICT was the bid. The successful bid came from CM Port with 55% equity, a local company with 30%, and then 15% by the Sri Lanka Ports Authority. The tender was awarded through a global international tender under the guidelines of the Asian Development Bank, who had funded the breakwater for the new deepwater basin. Going into the next PP, which was the Hambantota International Port. This was done without calling for public on the basis that there was a formal G2G in place. Had to nominate 2 or 3 companies for the government of Sri Lanka to call for bids. 2 company names are provided, and the government of Sri Lanka had the ability to had the opportunity to negotiate with call for bids from 2 companies and negotiate for the best deal. Right now, the shareholding is 85% by China Merchants and 15% by the government of Sri Lanka or Sri Lanka Ports Authority. But there is a clause in the agreement for the Sri Lanka Ports Authority to increase their equity by a further 20%, taking it up to 35%. Then we go to the East Container Terminal. There are 2. A tender was launched under the ADB assistance, but that tender got cancelled for administrative reasons. And there came a G2G agreement between the Indian, Japanese, and the Sri Lankan government. Hence, no bids were called, and they tried to negotiate. Again, as I mentioned, administrative issues caused the tender to be cancelled. And now the government has taken a decision to run the terminal by themselves. Then came along the West Container Terminal, again inside the same water basin. When ADB funded the breakwater, there were certain conditions attached to that funding. It was that out of the 3 terminals in the deep water basin, 2 terminals had to be run by PPP, and 1 terminal could be run by Sri Lanka Ports Authority. In the case of the West Container Terminal, the government of, there were no public bids called, similar to the HIPG project. But in the case of West Container Terminal, the government of India nominated just 1 company. So the Sri Lanka Ports Authority lost out on the potential advantage of negotiating with 2 competing bids. So this is the timeline of what happened with the CICT. Contrary to popular belief that this was selected without any bidding process, the whole bidding process was carried out under ADB guidelines and evaluations done by them. 5 proposals received, and in 2008 the tender was cancelled. In 2009, the invitations called again. 15 bidders collected documents. 7 or 8 were serious international players. And at the time of bid closure, unfortunately, there was only 1 consortia bidding, which was the CM Port together with the local company submitting the bid. But what is important to note, at the time of bid closure, the civil strife or the civil war in Sri Lanka was at its peak. Global economy was at its lowest. So therefore, I believe the other bidders did not submit their bids, and then CM Port took up the challenge and submitted a bid, and obviously won the bid. And it was a $500 million investment. We went into operations in 2014. The terminal was constructed in a record time. The ADB calculated the period for the total construction was 60 months, but the total construction was completed in 28 months by China Merchants Group, China Merchant Port Holding, sorry. So this placed Sri Lanka, that was a very critical move to make, as that was the time that the mega ships were being introduced. Sri Lanka did not have any deep water facility. So by tracking the construction of the terminal, CM Ports was able to place Sri Lanka on the map to handle the mega ships. The ADB conditions was that the first two terminals within the South Harbour must be run under the PPP process. But later on, negotiations between SLPA and ADB made it possible for any two terminals to be run by SLPA. Hence the reason the ECT and the WCT happening almost simultaneously. As for Hambantota Port, the structure you can see is the CM Port, which is holding the major share under Hambantota International Port Group. And then we have a subsidiary company, which is Hambantota International Port Services. The services company is directly responsible for providing the navigation services, the security services, and all ISPS related services, which come under the company headed by the Ports Authority. If you look at the CICT contribution to Sri Lanka or the Port of Colombo, in 2014, the volume growth in Colombo was 14% in the Port of Colombo. This was made possible because CICT capacity came on stream. And that time, we were judged as the second fastest growing port in the world. The volume kept growing until CICT came to almost saturation point. And in 2018, again, there was 14% growth in the Port of Colombo. Again, bringing Colombo to #1 position for growth in the world. Since then, of course, we know what happened in 2020. That's history. We hope it stays there. And then 21, I think we can see some growth taking place. If you look at the bottom graph relates to Hambantota. Hambantota Port operation management was taken over by CM Port in 2017 December. So in effect, 2018 was the first full year of operation. And the green graph shows how the volume shot up by way of the RoRo volumes. And even in 2020, it was a very slight dip, given the circumstances. That's a record performance for Hambantota. And we see improving on this growth in this coming year. The results of the first quarter shows that. As for opportunities and the challenges we have, I think there's tremendous potential in growing the industrial zone. The Port of Hambantota's uniqueness is that it has an industrial zone within the port, which is a free port. We have around 300 hectares of land where we are promoting industries to be set up. 3 or 4 industries, two are already being signed off, and the other 2 are in the pipeline. We believe that this will create the opportunity for Sri Lanka to change the balance between gateway cargo and transshipment cargo. Right now, the gateway cargo in Sri Lanka counts to about 18% as against the 82% of transshipment cargo. The Sri Lankan government policy of developing industries within the free port of Hambantota, and just outside the Hambantota boundary, there is also a free zone run by the Board of Investment of Sri Lanka. And we believe there will be cargo produced, local cargo produced, which would feed the Port of Hambantota as well as change the formula on the domestic and the transshipment cargo. As for the challenges we have, the major issue right now, what we say is the slow progression in capacity addition in the Port of Colombo, lack of funds, of course. And then, of course, the policy-wise, right now we have no official regulator for ports, although there are 3 PPPs working with the private sector. SLPA, the Sri Lanka Ports Authority, happens to be the landlord, the regulator, and the competitor, because they are all holding shares and they are also running terminals. So this is a bit of a crunch situation that investors need to look at, and the government, I believe, is already trying to address that issue, as it is very complex. So that's about it from me. I would be free to take any more questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Tisa. Thank you for sharing with us the port development in Sri Lanka. It's interesting to know that there are actually lots of stakeholders in the port sector in Sri Lanka. So we have 5 minutes left for immediate questions or clarifications. Is there any questions from the floor that you want to ask?
So there's one question from
Yes,
me.
Chris, please.
So is the government of Sri Lanka, well, I see the challenging opportunity strength of the pub business. So one challenge is lack of fund. The PPP is right now the form to cooperate with the private investor to getting the port constructions investment to the land. But will the government look at a wider, a more relaxed or more attractive condition to attract the investor, like the longer operation period, or better term that the investor feel that is a better return of his investment?
Yes, Tisa, about the partnership or investment model, do you have any response?
Yes, actually the complexity I showed out in my slide was the fact that the landlord, which is the Port Authority, there's a mandatory requirement that they hold 15% equity. Plus, they are also in the same business. Plus, they are also the regulator as at now. But as far as the incentives for the investors are concerned, that's something to do with together with the Board of Investment. Board of Investment has the power and the authority to decide on the incentives to be given, but those incentives obviously are worked together with the Sri Lanka Ports Authority, who happens to be the landlord. So depending on the real model that is introduced by the investor, it is open for negotiation. I hope I have answered the question.
Yeah, so I also understand that actually there are, for example, the West Corridor terminal may have a slightly different PPP model than what we had before in Colombo. So I might just take the privilege of the chair to ask the questions. Tisa, do you mind to explain a little bit the difference between the two models? The current one.
Yeah, the West Container Terminal model and the Hambantota model, if you look at it, it's both have been done without going for public bids due to the fact that there have been G2G agreements with the government of Sri Lanka, one with China and one with India and Japan. So hence the reason why no bids had been called. But as I mentioned, for the Hambantota bid, of course, the government of China nominated 2 companies, and the government of Sri Lanka had the opportunity to get 2 bids and start negotiating. And for the West Terminal, of course, unfortunately, as at now, there's only 1 company that's been nominated, and so the government had no option but to negotiate with that company. But of course, the project is not taken off yet. They are in the stages of discussing or negotiating their concession agreement. That's the subtle difference between those 2 ports and what happened with CICT and also with what happened with SAGT. SAGT also was an operating terminal which went into a PPP. Similar to Hambantota was an operating port that went into a PPP. So those are the similarities between the 4 PPP projects.
Okay, thank you very much for the quick response. So I think there are a lot to be asked and interact later on in terms of the port development during the panel discussions. So let's move on. Lisa, thank you very much. So let's move on to the third presentation by engineer Chris Lau. He has participated in the construction industry for more than 35 years. He has extensive experience in managing and overall planning of large-scale site formation works, road and drainage, bridge work, and infrastructure work. He is engaged in various contracts with different natures and is familiar with different systems of project administrations and contract management. Between year 2005 to 2008, he was assigned to stay overseas to manage a number of construction projects in Sri Lanka and Qatar. During his 4 years staying in Sri Lanka, he participated in the formulation of some major infrastructure projects which became realized in later stage, the Hambantota Port development and the Matala Rajapaksa International Airport. Upon his return to Hong Kong, he was assigned to lead a new set of division, the Overseas Services sections, which overlook and also provide all-round services to back up his company's overseas branch office in project tendering and running, most of them located in Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Africa. So today, again, because of his experience, Chris will also share with us his views and experience in port development. Chris, please.
Good morning, everybody. So thanks for Linda's introduction to myself. So today I'm going to share the PPT with, I know the 10 minutes time span is very tight. But can someone help me to make my share to this slide? Anyone?
Yeah.
I can't add my PPT on the Zoom.
Okay, 1 minute.
It's version 3, yes. Thanks, Linda. Okay. So I can't shift the.
You can control.
So I give you a signal to you. Sorry about it. Okay, so I think that I would like to have a few items to share with the audience. This is a mainly focus of the Chinese enterprise in the since the even earlier than the strategy of the One Belt One Road. Like our company has already started our business in Sri Lanka more since I think it's 1990s years, more than 20 years. So let's move on. So we understand that how Sri Lanka has the sort of geographical advantages, which is right sit in the south of the Indian Ocean, and it's very designated point of the One Belt One Road in this Marine Sea Road. This is the when the route to the Africa is a midpoint of the marine sort of route, starting from the Fuzhou of China. Yes, please. So you know that Sri Lanka have a very quite eager to attract investment from foreign country. That we know that he has signed some international agreement with the different countries. So this is some very sort of try to initiate and the move of the fund from the outside the countries to bring the economic growth of the of itself. So the China's enterprise has I think at the very beginning has tried to get the infrastructure and sort of investment, and also by bringing some soft loan from the China Bank to finance the construction of infrastructure of the Sri Lanka. So so you can see from this slide, starting from 2005 to 2015, the source of fiscal assistance and foreign direct investment in China is substantially growth. And also the private investment is also bring the funding into the countries. Yes, next please. So since I'm working in the China Harbor, which is a state-owned construction company, so our sort of works involved in the Sri Lanka cover the following: the Colombo Port City development, the Hambantota Port, and the Colombo South Colombo Port expansion. Hambantota is the national airport. Another development like the power supply, the coal power plant, and some expressways around the Colombo. So this is, I mean, over last 15 years that we bring the infrastructure to the Sri Lanka, and it has very significant, what they call the positive impact, we believe, to the growth of Sri Lanka economy. Yes, please. So we also observed that there's some Hong Kong sort of enterprise to invest in the Sri Lanka, but the majority of this is not so there, like the infrastructure, like the roadworks and the beach and the airport, because this is need to bring with the soft loan. So the Hong Kong enterprise are looking for some part of business have got sort of faster return, like the building of the hotels, and there's that sort of a telecommunication sort of business. They're working quite well now. They're getting some good return now, as I understand. So I'm more focused on the infrastructure status of the Sri Lanka. So we know that the airport is been expanded quite a lot. When I first arrived to Sri Lanka, this is an airport can, I think, accommodate around, if I am correct, is there's around 100, not more than 100 flights per day. So there's a few stage of expansion of the airport near Colombo, and also years ago the second international airport it was built, and Hambantota, that increased quite a lot of the capacity. So the port this is keep on expanding. Our company involved the Hambantota port construction and also the sort of South Colombo expansion, which seems quite sort of very effective in the port business. So also we involved in the build of the 5-star hotel in Colombo. So Shangri-La Hotel is our sort of baby. Is right now in operate now. And Port City is one of the sort of significant project that our group CCCC also involved the investment, and the whole city, Port of City's infrastructure are financed by our group, and we get the share of use of land for a portion of the land being recommended for the operate for 70 years. So I don't mention too detailed. This is the port and airport and highway that we have already built. So the involvement of the China enterprise for infrastructure, I just picked some example with the photo and picture. This is a port city, we say. It's right now. This is the first foreign invested sort of portfolio of this kind. The investor give the funding for the whole infrastructure spending and get the share of the use of land. And the port that I don't repeat, which has been sort of introduced, is also the container in the South Colombo. One more, the expressway. When I arrived in Sri Lanka, there's no enclosed highway been built for the country of around 22 million population. Right now, there's been quite a lot of sort of development in the road network now. Okay, our company's experience. This is we involved in those infrastructure construction is our main business. At the beginning, we worked in like a port, a small port, fisher pond, but coming with times, we get more sort of precipitation in the infrastructures, like the airport, highway, power plant, and even the hotel construction. So this is our company background. I think you can see from the other video. I don't mention too detail. And this is the Colombo port that were under reclamation. And port city is a port city. Okay, this is also a construction stage photo. And when total right now in operation, this is a dry dot method that we use. So after a large scale of excavation, we get infill the water and form this support. Also, this is the airport. We just use 3 years that we compete and get the operation start. Okay, another roadwork networks. This is at the north, close to India, quite remote, but this is a kind of sort of funding we obtained from help to the government to obtain funding to build. Also, South Colombo terminal project. This is a cricket stadium that we built for the special build for the International World Cup, Cricket World Cup matches. And last of my presentation, I have to say that we need to respect the local culture as enterprise or as China and Hong Kong teams of Persian state in the Sri Lanka. We need to respect to the following factor: the religious belief, the discipline, the value of life. With this respect, we can work very close cooperation manner with the local Sri Lankan. They enjoy wildlife, and when we work at our sort of construction part, we must keep the environmental environment to natural environment to the minimum disturbed as much as possible. So we need to respect the value of the resident. This is my experience share in working in environmental. Also, we need to make use of the local resources as much as possible, including the manpower, and try to give much training to the peoples in Sri Lanka. And what I need to say is that they need a very large sort of room for improvement for the kind of transportation. The logistic problem is the most difficult problem we face in the construction industry. As I say, training is very, very important, that we need to transfer of our technology to the local people and let them later involved in the construction industry by themselves. Okay, this is we need to work safety and care of this care of ourselves, and need to work at the more in the group activities, and on the other hand maintain privacy of our works, of our group of people. All right, sorry, a little bit long for this presentation. So
yeah, thank you, Chris. I'm also sorry. I think I forgot to introduce your title.
That's okay.
Sorry about that. Chris Lau is the director of Zhenghua Engineering Company Limited, also Deputy General Manager of Business Development Department of China Harbour Engineering Company. So he has given us a overview on the company's business in Sri Lanka. So we have 5 minutes left. May I ask if there's any questions? Linda, please.
Yes, thanks, Chris, for very informative presentation. We see lots of pictures, okay, very beautiful pictures of the major infrastructure projects that are your company and also other companies, okay, have built for Sri Lanka. And as you mentioned, some of these projects are financed by soft loans or grants, and some are FDI projects, right? Some are investor projects. So, well, we heard, I don't know what, for those financed by soft loans or grants, which means that your company will get the funding from those sources, right? And for those invested projects, which means that you are also the shareholder, which means that you have to, contribute to the capital, and then, so is there any concerns about, the long years for return for this kind of project?
The soft loan is not by our company. This would need to line up with the bank in China. They provide quite a good terms, like the long return repay period and good interest rate. This is a strategy follow the China government One Belt One Road. But not only this one, the Sri Lanka also been supported by other developing countries like Japan, like even Norway. The Triangle Mirror project we do is financed by Norway government, not actually grant, but also a soft loan. This I think long time Sri Lanka maintain a good relationship with the internationally, like Japan, like the North Europe countries, so they can get, since they are still developing, they get some even Asian bank or World Bank also provide them funding. But of course, this is not a kind of always asking for high return for the bank, that they follow the country's strategy. This is the kind of soft loan sources. For the investment, you can see my introduction contains like some hotel investment, and also the port investment. Hotel investment is since the decrease of civil war, they become quite a tourist attractive region, I believe, of this country. When I was there, the annual volume of tour visitor is just less than 1 million, but there has been substantially growth over years after the squeeze of the civil war, because the natural environment of Sri Lanka is very good. So I think this is still attractive for the investor, but they need to look at a rather long return period. And like our group, CCCC group, has quite what we call a pilot enterprise to start this form of port city. This is the one that's designated example to finance the whole infrastructure by return of the share of the land use. This is the first time in this country have such a kind of project.
Okay, thank you for the response. I think we can discuss a lot more about what are the available resources in Sri Lanka, and also what are your experience in terms of looking at the rate of return for investing in Sri Lanka. So we will leave that all those interesting questions to the panel discussions. I think now we all need a break. We can have a short break for 5 minutes. And before that, I would like to mention again that I am sure every participant have already received our training packs. We have provided every participant with a comprehensive background information of Sri Lanka as a training pack. So I would encourage you to have a look during the break. And then that I'm sure also that will provide you with some information to our presentation and discussions later on after the break. Okay, so we will be back in 5 minutes. See you all soon. Our fourth presentations by Mr. Thirukumar Nadarasa, Chief Executive Officer, Hutchison Telecommunications Lanka Limited. Thiru is a UK qualified telecoms professional with a bachelor degree from Loughborough University, a master degree in telecommunication from Aston Birmingham, and a master degree in management from Imperial College. He has over 30 years of experience in the telecom industry, initially with Singapore Telecoms, and then for more than 20 years with Hutchison Telecoms Hong Kong. Thiru is presently based in Sri Lanka, and last year has led a unique merger of two nationwide mobile operations of Hutch and Etisalat in order to compete more effectively with the market leaders, and also to position the merged company for future broadband data expansion in 4G and 5G. Thiru's primary mission has been to enter new markets and establish greenfield telecom operations, including fully localized organizations focused on addressing the specific needs of the local markets with the most appropriate wireless technologies for shareholders. He has also been involved in the restructuring and refocusing of underperforming telecom operations in the region. So today, he will share with us his experience working in Sri Lanka, particularly focusing on this emerging market. Thiru, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. I've uploaded my presentation. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to speak at this workshop. I'm always happy to support any Hong Kong initiatives, since we are a Hong Kong company as well. I've just prepared a few slides, given the time limit of 10 minutes, to expand upon what we've been doing here in Sri Lanka. Moving on to the first slide, a quick update on my group. Hutchison Sri Lanka is part of the CK Hutchison Group in Hong Kong, which I'm sure a lot of Hong Kong-based people will be very familiar with. We're a global company with more than 300,000 employees in 50 countries. We're not just a telecom company. We are in many areas of business, retail, infrastructure, energy, but also in particular, we are also in the port area globally, which might be an interesting point. In telecoms, we are operating in 12 markets around the world, primarily in Europe, but with a few operations in Asia. supporting 128 million subscribers. And on the port side, we are managing over 53 ports across 27 countries around the world, including Felixstowe, of course, Hong Kong ports as well, amongst the many ports. In Sri Lanka, Hutchison, we've had a long history in Sri Lanka. We entered Sri Lanka back in 1997. So it's more than 20 years that we have been here in Sri Lanka. And as you can see from the date, we have been, been here before the civil strife that happened for 30 years, or during the civil strife, and we have been patient investors ever since then up until today, where we've been developing the mobile network in stages, moving from a GSM network to a 3G network in 2012, and then finally, we have done a major merger with Etisalat Lanka, who had also an operation here in Sri Lanka, where we merged two operations together and deployed a brand new 4G network in 2019. Just to correct a number on the investment, this merger and 4G network, we were looking at we've invested more than $100 million in the last 2 years into this merger and 4G network, and as such, we're well positioned, to further develop the telecom market here. A little bit of background on the market. The market, I think there's still a lot of opportunity for the telecom sector, because one fact is that only 50% of the population have got a smartphone. So 50% of the population have still not got onto a smartphone yet. They're still using the old feature phones. So that is a kind of indicator of the potential we see in Sri Lanka. We are competing against two other internationally invested operators, Axiata from Malaysia, and Sri Lanka Telecom, which also has a Malaysian investor. So there are three major investors, plus Airtel of India also here. They have a smaller operation in Sri Lanka, but they're also here. So the thing is that the telecom industry in Sri Lanka is well invested, and all operators have foreign investors, participating. So I think it's one sector we can say has been a successful, foreign direct investment success story in Sri Lanka. And together we've been able to grow and develop the telecom infrastructure to be one of the best infrastructures in the region. We have 100% plus mobile penetration. So almost everybody has a mobile phone today. We have one of the lowest and most affordable tariffs in the world. So it's a very affordable mobile service. But the new opportunities, as I said, is the development of high-speed broadband, 3G, 4G, and eventually 5G services that represents opportunity for us going forward. Moving on to my second slide. Here, I just want to, draw some commonalities between Sri Lanka and Hong Kong, where most of our audience is based in right now. As you will all probably know very well, both Sri Lanka and Hong Kong were both British colonies. So we have a shared common history or shared common past. We both have a British-based system of government. Sri Lankan law is also, based on the English common law. Of course, the common language is also important, where English is the main language of business here. The education system is also modeled on a British system. And of course, we both have to share a very common religion in terms of Buddhism. And even in the present, as has been shown in the previous speaker's presentation slides, we have a very strong relationship with China, going back a long history. Sri Lanka was one of the first countries in the world to recognize the People's Republic of China in 1957. And today, as you've seen from the previous presenters, China is today the major trading and investment partner for Sri Lanka today, investing in many infrastructure projects, as has been shown in the previous presentations. So we have a lot of commonalities, I think, in particular, that a shared history and a shared present, which I think could be useful in considerations for future foreign investment opportunities. My last slide is just to kind of talk a little bit about Sri Lanka as an emerging market. What I want to say is that, as an emerging market, we have a resilient economy. We have one of the highest GDPs in the South Asia region. We have a number of exports and professional services. I think the ICT industry in Sri Lanka is under development, good development. And that is because, we have quite a skilled workforce. Our education standards are quite high, and our level of productivity is also quite high. So there is a skilled workforce available that could be trained and developed. Infrastructure has been developed over the last 20 years, as again has been explained by the previous speakers. So we have strong transport and other infrastructure being built, particularly the new port city development that's currently in process. So I think we have a strong basis or foundation on which investors could consider. And of course, as mentioned, as the theme of today's workshop, we are also part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, where we can play a role there as well. But finally, as I should say, as with any emerging market in the world or in Asia, whether it's Philippines or Cambodia or Indonesia or etc., there are associated risks that need to be understood and taken into account in considering. There is the political risks, there's economic risks, there's a currency risks, and these should be factored into anyone's business plans and business developments. But why do people still invest in emerging markets? Because they still deliver highest growth potential. So that comes with the risk, but it shows it offers the highest growth potential for any investor. So as long as the risks are managed, there is opportunity here, in developing an investment. So that is my quick sub 10-minute presentation, just giving an overview of where we are, and I can take any questions now, if there's any.
Thank you, Thiru, very much for a very well-timed presentation. So we have the entire 10 minutes left for immediate questions. So is there any questions from the floor or clarifications that you want to make? Linda?
Yes. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think so. Thiru, can you hear Linda?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, good. Because sometimes I don't know. Thanks, Thiru. I'm just thinking, because Hutchison, has been in Sri Lanka for over 30 years, as you said, right? So I really see from the timeline, there's been quite a number of very important landmark developments. Can you share a little bit here? What is your what do you just think is the most important message, for people who haven't entered the Sri Lankan market, okay, or
yes.
To consider, because you Hutchison has been there for 30 years, right? And then
Yes.
communication, does not only work with enterprises, but also actual retail business as well.
Yes.
So yeah, any
Thank you. Yes, I think yes, I think yes, we Hutchison, we are also in Sri Lanka have invested in an infrastructure project, which is basically telecom infrastructure. So we are an infrastructure investor, and like most infrastructure investments, whether it's a hotel or whether it's a port or whether it's a highway or whether it's a telecom network, one thing is that you have to have a long-term view. You have to have a medium long-term view. these businesses are not a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year turnaround situation. So you must have a kind of long-term view, and that is also important in the context of the emerging market volatility. In any emerging market, not just Sri Lanka, there will be short-term and medium-term volatilities. There will be ups and downs. There will be macro events that can impact you, and these things, will happen. And I think, by having a longer-term view, you can kind of ride this out and keep developing the opportunity in long term. So what I would advise is that investors, particularly in infrastructure, have to take a long-term view here and grow with the country and seek opportunities to develop with the country in a longer term. I think Hutchison has demonstrated that. We have not just come to Sri Lanka and for a few years. We've been here. Once we invest, we're invested, and then we stay here and continue to develop our business and infrastructure as we go along. So my advice is that you should keep in mind and keep an open mind and keep a long-term view and take into account and accept the risks that are associated with investing in such a country.
Yeah, a follow-up questions on that is, you mentioned a lot about the common past between Hong Kong and Sri Lanka. We have a sharing number of commonalities in terms of our, we are both British colonies and education language. Would you mind telling us how particularly from your experience in Sri Lanka, how these common past help you to plan for the long-term business or strategies in Sri Lanka?
Yes. So, as an investor, we have to look at the environment or the ground on which we want to invest in. And I think coming from Hong Kong, and as a Hong Kong investor, it gives us a reassurance that Sri Lanka has some commonalities, such as the law is based on a common English law. We have an English language, and also the government is quite similar because it's based on a British-based system to Hong Kong. So these give us some kind of reassurances that and some comfort that that there is some commonalities on which we are investing in. And I have worked with Hutchison. I've worked in Indonesia. I've worked in Vietnam. In fact, I've been based in Myanmar and in Thailand and in India over the last 20 years of my experience with Hutchison. So apart from India, you can imagine like places like Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia. You may not have Thailand, for that matter. You may not have these commonalities that for a foreign investor, it's maybe slightly different kind of environments in terms of language, law, etc. And even style of government. So I think that's the kind of point I want to make, is that unlike these other countries, maybe India is maybe in the same boat as Sri Lanka. We have some common background on which to base our long-term investments in. So that is also very positive, I feel, for an investor to consider. And I think that helped us also to to understand and engage. Because obviously all investments are based on legal agreements, contractual agreements, regulatory agreements, government agreements. So if there's a commonality there, that helps in understanding how Sri Lanka works.
Yeah, Linda.
Yeah, Theo, can I also have a follow-up? Actually, I have two. Okay. First of all, is that to follow on your stress on the need for long-term view. Certainly, I think many of us will subscribe to that. But on the other hand, even if an investor has the capital for
can afford to work for a long term. I think he or she would still have a question. That is, what would be your advice how to succeed in the long term? Because just I think that advice would still be important. The secondly is I think other than infrastructure, obviously telecommunication is infrastructure investment, but also there is an aspect of retailing, right? Because you are after you set up infrastructure, you still have to market the services, and there is competing services, right, to your clients, and that includes individuals and families. So this retailing part, maybe it is not so much as infrastructure investment, but a more conventional marketing skills and the observations of the market. So any insights? Because I'm mindful that on those this aspect might have more transferability for other industries. For instance, the SMEs. They might be interested as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. We have 3 minutes left, so please respond briefly, and then we can carry on later if it's not.
Okay. Okay. Just a quick response on both questions. On the long-term investment issue, I want to stress that Hutchison is a long-term investor, but we're not a permanent investor. Okay, I mean, so there's a difference between long-term investor and a permanent investor. Okay. I'm not here forever, etc. So what I'm saying is, in a long-term investor, as a long-term investor, I think what my advice is that investors should have a long-term mindset, but look for opportunities to monetize. There are investment cycles, there are ups and downs, economic cycles. So they should be look for opportunities. Where they can monetize the investment or expand or extract an investment out. So that's what we should do. I mean, we invested in India. We were one of the first investors in India. We were one of the first telecom investors in India, and I was there in India as well. And we were there for for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. But then Vodafone came and offered to buy us out at a huge premium, and we said, why not? And today Vodafone owns our operation in India. Okay, so you just have to wait for the opportunity on when you can monetize this, but have a long-term mindset and wait for the right opportunity. The second thing is, in terms of the local marketing, yes, we operate 40,000 retail outlets out there offering prepay services. 90% of our market is prepay customers. But the good thing is that as an industry, as an industry with 4 or 5 operators, we have jointly developed a common infrastructure. So the same retailer is selling not just our services but our competitor services. So it's a common infrastructure that is supporting, and these 40,000 outlets are giving employment to a couple of 100,000 people in Sri Lanka. So we manage this essentially as an industry, and make sure that we compete on our services, but we have a common distribution network that is supporting the entire industry, and we work together to develop that jointly. Thank you.
Thank you too. I think we can discuss more, especially when we talk about retail experiences, that also in response to our first speaker, Sabasini, who actually want to talk about public sentiment. So I think we will have a lot more interesting discussion during the panel section. But now we need to move on. So our last speaker, Mr. Peter Jiang, who is the chairman of Humble Enterprises Limited. Peter is the co-founder and chairman of Humble Group. He had been responsible for the company's business development and marketing, and successfully led the group to list on the main board of the Hong Kong Exchange in July 2014. He sold all his shares of Humble in October 2016 and has diversified into various businesses, including food and beverages, program trading, blockchain, and IT ESG reporting, co-working, and incubation center. His recent focus is on IT development in supply chain management and trade finance. Mr. Zhang obtained an Executive Master of Business Administration degree and a Doctor of Business Administration degree at the University of Hong Kong. He's also at the City University of Hong Kong, our university. He is also Business Advisor of Operation and Supply Chain Management at College of Business, City University of Hong Kong, the co-founder of the Hong Kong Apparel Society Limited, which is an influential representative organization of apparel industry. SMEs in Hong Kong. He's also currently council member of Hong Kong Textile Council, the executive committee member of Sustainable Fashion Business Consortium and Fashion Industry Development Council in Hong Kong. So, Peter, you're going to share with us your very interesting and valuable experience as a SME and endeavor in Sri Lanka. And Peter has already shared his bio with us.
Yeah.
And he's going to share with us in a minute. Peter.
Okay. Is it clear to hear my voice?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I think it's the right time for me to come up. I think I can represent entrepreneur and also SME. I have some story with Colombo for my work life experience. Let's start and have some fun. I think I can fill the gap about how we can move forward to work something in Colombo, because I think we have some data, some information for the macro side. So go to a micro side. So this is me. I have a really good opportunity in Colombo. That's my picture with Chandana, my friend and colleagues. Luckily, I work in the apparel industry. By 1987, I was sent to Colombo to work in a factory as a trainee. So I start my journey with Sri Lanka over there. And after that, I start my own business, and by chance, I can restart the production in Colombo, in Sri Lanka. Then even with my partner, we go out to have a project in Kenya. So, but by 2005, because the apparel industry have a big change, because the market is totally open, there is no quota restriction, China is open. So no choice, have to withdraw. So, and after I work hard and get some little money, and we think about at the right time, 2018, I think that year is a very important signal for China and with the relationship with the ASEAN country. So we have our first import events in Shanghai. So by the chance, I think about to do something with Sri Lanka, which I like the country. So what I did, I think if you have been into Sri Lanka, you know there's a famous restaurant, which is the top 50 Asian restaurant, Minister of Crab. And for me, we also want to invest with some healthy investment. So we take the right trend of sustainability and also ESG standard for for our investment. So Minister of Crab is nice. I think we can learn cross culture, and you can see my partners. They're very famous cricket player, so everybody can draw their attention. One is Mr. Kumar and also Mihila, yes. And the chef is also from Sri Lankan and Japan culture. So I think it's a good mix. The investment is from Hong Kong, but the shop is our shop is in Shanghai, like that. So let me introduce a little bit about what we are doing. We slowly transform ourselves into a group of company. We call ourselves Fufa Lab. Fufa in Chinese is just trying from scratch to something. We try to develop something. I say thank you to CityU because that is my lifetime journey for further education. I didn't go have a degree, go to college. I just finished my high school, and I learned most of the thing is actually from Colombo for international trade and even my English. So right now what we did is a lifestyle, supply chain, IT infrastructure, and last is finance. You can see that a lot of people give me comments, and Peter, it seems like an ecosystem. Yes, to match with the macro investment, because we need now, I think we all see a new normal here, right? So I don't explain a lot of this company, but let's say one of this, Barbarossa, they are quite famous in Shanghai. So I think it's a good match. So Barbarossa is located in the People's Park in Shanghai. So I bring in Minister of Crab. I give them the best spot, which we have, to have a joint venture. I think we want to really make some noise. And the crab, the mud crab, is because we do supply chain. So we bring in the mud crab, live mud crab, not like a lot of those you have it in Singapore, which is the farm. Our crab is different. So we also have a lot of like Look Cafe, Demeter, Beauty Look, Nail Bar, Salasusu, Crew, Content First. So all this company is lifestyle and also e-commerce, maybe. That is, I heard Hutchison, I think the smartphone and also logistic and also e-commerce will be the new normal. So why I want to engage with this? We have discussing, because of the pandemic, the project slowed down. We think about to open cafe, Hong Kong, Bristol in Colombo, because since we have a crossover. So, and then, with the space, we can share the experience, like in our shop. People will ask tea. So we can, have a space for them to experience what kind of tea Colombo can bring in. It's more like a promotion. And for supply chain, traditionally we involve some technology in DLT, which some people involve in blockchain. They will mention about blockchain, but for us to apply in supply chain is distribution ledger technology for traceability. And then we can slowly do some microfinancing. So this is the mix, and this is what we have been waiting to go to Colombo, but the time slow us down. And we also have some other project. So this is what our network for Fufa Lab. We're based in Wuxi, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Hong Kong, Macau, and also the other site at Nampan, Colombo, and Chittagong. So it's a mix. We have some insight to work with local partner. There's a lot of good location for agricultural land because they have been slowing down for more than 20 years. Education is high. We have a few Colombo staff who have been working together for more than 20 years. For Colombo, still my local staff will comment, but this is totally wrong. He always mentioned to me the property in Colombo is very expensive. I said, no, you make a mistake. For the city, is always the growth rate is there. And the other improvement is foreign exchange control. Right now, forex investor, you can have your own bank account. Before is very difficult, Chris, right? So you still have to, you don't have any foreign currency to purchase. You need to get US dollar from the central bank. Sometimes that is the difficulties. And then also the ownership. I think this is a very big barrier. If a foreign investor, you cannot have the share of that company more than 50%. So, but I know some industry you can. So this is us. So I'll give you some case. Look Cafe, this one is in Colombo. So we start this kind of business, small investment, but we want to grow the local GDP and want to engage with the local culture using a coffee brand. So it's a start. Look Cafe is right now in Colombo in Phnom Penh for 5 years. And we have a new project to work with Science Park to bring the coffee and the bin for traceability and also cross-culture. So next will be e-commerce. So from online, offline, so how we can bring out activities. So a coffee shop. In the coffee shop, we also sell, local product. So among beauty, I think some data we know from India, from Sri Lanka, skincare production product is very good. What I know is they can sell very easy and premium, but not a major industry now. So this is a small business, small engagement. So Demeter is a tea brand. Salasusu is a handcraft. So I think Chris, if anybody have to be to Colombo, Paradise Row is one of the very good brand, which they run restaurant and also a lot of souvenir. So for SME, for people like us, I think a crossover, we can do a lot. Yeah. So this is a coconut farm investment, but our colleague, our team reject the project because they say that the ROI is too long, 14 years. But I still insist to have a second study because what other value product, let's say like coconut oil, right? Or maybe we can do something else because they didn't bring in any technology, just a normal. If we can do some value added, maybe the ROI can be not 14 years. But for me, 14 years is not very bad. Also, we point out some difficulty in Colombo. I think it's little improvement, but still, frankly speaking, as a foreign investor, unless you are working with some PPP big project, for SME, it's very difficult to get into project in Colombo. Not easy at all. So what we did is I bring in coffee shop, small business, e-commerce, and I try to add like an accelerator with Hong Kong Trade Development Council. So I'm a contact point and a businessman and an entrepreneur. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for the wonderful presentation on a paradise-like business opportunity. Although there are also a lot of risks to look at. So we have like 9 to 10 minutes left for immediate questions. So are there any questions? Phyllis, please.
Yes. Can you hear me? Hello? Yes. Peter, just now you mentioned that the coconut farm, the 14 years is considered to be long. Mm-hmm. So what is the average payback period for the other, for your other business?
Frankly speaking, for me, 14 years is not long because, is good. But there is opportunity cost for the budget.
Yeah.
Internally, we are arguing that, shall we invest this budget in other place? Mm-hmm. That's the challenge. But I don't give up. I tell them, because we have nail bar, we do skincare product, what other side product we can develop to make that project sustain. For us, one project is maybe not one player. We would invite nail bar or Mercy Beauty. We, like I showed to you, the whole food bar lab is different entity, different partnership. But of course, I'm the majority shareholders.
Okay. Then, for example, if someone would like to go to Sri Lanka to open a coffee shop, or what is the average payback period that is?
Oh, that is very challenging. It depends on how we learn bad experience, where you locate. Yeah. Let's say for Shanghai, if you, let's say in Colombo, you have to get the right location. Yeah. It doesn't mean that, and the investment would not be big because I always suggest you have to shake hands with local partners. And in fact, Colombo, you cannot run it by your own. Don't do it by your own.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So then it actually resonates to this presentation about commonalities. So Peter actually mentioned that you need to go there with friends there, with good network, so that you can find, for example, a prime location and do the right work. So then what did you learn then from, for example, Tu's presentation about number of commonalities? Do you find which one is the most important for you to identify and success in your business endeavor? What is the most important thing?
I think you always consider you will take some risk, right? You make friends, and your mission statement to go to Colombo. If you, let's say, just like my project for plantation, our own, we have a committee. Our own team will reject it because they are considered that as a whole. Most of the investment plan, for commercial terms, will have a no-go unless you have a special purpose or wider long-range plan. So this is the challenge. Okay, my team stopped the coconut plant, but I want it to be reinstated and give them a challenge is, can you make some crossover to make more value, to make it sustain? Right? So it's quite challenging. No, you cannot find one single answer, right? It depends on your own corporate and your mission statement or your company vision. So it's very difficult because you have opportunity cost always for commercial consideration.
Can I follow up?
Sure.
Yeah, I think this is very, oh, sorry for that, very quickly. Because I'm thinking, maybe that's the nature of business, right?
Yes.
Enterprising, being an entrepreneur, starting a new business, obviously have to be taking risk.
Yes.
So by definition, there is no risk-free business.
Yes.
So, but of course, the more that applies to if we're doing business overseas, right?
Mm-hmm.
So because there's new factors, but so what does make it attractive? Because risk always there, right? What makes it attractive?
Oh, very attractive.
Chris, do you have a similar questions?
Not similar.
Not similar, but then
yeah, I do a quick. It's really your own choice. For me, I consider Colombo like long time ago, my first time visit. People name it as a paradise, and they have a lot of natural resources. Education background is good, so that's why I engage with some local staff. I recruit them, to work in Bangladesh. So I think it's very good, but you have to take the challenge. Like my case, the committee say no, but entrepreneur thinking, I think is a yes, without no reason. But it's commercial terms for economic consideration. I should not make that decision because it's different poles. So you have to make a choice. Chris?
Yes, Peter, well, we've gone through the presentation. We know that the big enterprise from Hong Kong will focus on the hotel, tourist, telecom.
Yeah.
So, and the infrastructure for the main China construction company. So, nowadays in Sri Lanka, what's the middle and small enterprise from Hong Kong focus on? What sort of business they're focusing on?
The good question for me already, Minister of Crab is a very successful case.
Okay.
I bring them inside the loyalty program, franchise partnership. We have good margin, and the business is so good. Even only because of the pandemic. Otherwise, we try to even Hangzhou, a lot of nice spot. They calling me to bring in Minister of Crab and even ask me more. Because we need, especially in China, they need new things, and this people start to think about, hey, Peter, some customer asks, where is Colombo? And we later on, we have a traceability application to show them where the crab come from, with some technology.
So this kind of natural resources related business.
Yes. And e-commerce at the end. What we want to
start with small size.
Yes, start with small size, and you can afford. And partnership. There's another brand I tell my colleagues to check it out. It's Paradise Road. You can check it out from the internet, which I always bought my souvenir over there when I worked there. Very nice. And also they run restaurant. And also there's some small hotel you can check it from the internet. Okay, I explain to you, Lighthouse, Pochit Hotel. If you're holding $2-3 million US, I think it's a good investment. But you need to get back how you get back your money. That's the biggest challenge. And my suggestion is you have both sides trade. So you can have a balance. Once you invest, once you trade, so you can have your profit there. And I see some infrastructure is very complex. You like me, I invite my Colombo partner to set to come to Hong Kong to register in Hong Kong, help them to get a citizenship and taxation. So I'm a little expertise on this because you want to save tax and you want to be 100% compliance. So you have to think more and do more about all those compliance things and standards. So there's a way. Yeah.
Okay. So when you're talking about how to get the money back, it is actually not really only about how to do the business right in order to make profit, but also literally how to get the cash
Yes.
back. So therefore you figure
That's
out,
why import-export.
yeah, import
That's why
export
we
trade.
encourage people to partnership both ways.
There is also something that the traditional Chinese have been doing all along during with the Silk Road, that they are doing the trade business in order to get the money back by actually get the goods.
You sell
back.
them something and buy back something.
So very interesting. So let's save all these discussions to our panel discussion. So thank you, all the speakers, all the presentations are finished, complete, and then we can now earn our 5 minutes break. And then we'll move on to the panel discussions. Welcome back to our workshop. So we will start our panel discussions. Before I open up the panel for questions from the floor, I would like to invite our discussant today, Professor Linda Lee, who will then first give us a general comments and provide us with some discussion directions for 10 minutes, and then I will invite the speakers to respond to Linda's maybe comments or questions, and then I'll open up the floor to participants who have asked questions in the chat box, or later on, if you have questions, you may also have chance to speak up. So Linda, please.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I enjoyed the presentation and discussion so far very much. I think I would want to leave more time for response from the speakers and also from question and answers from the floor. So I try to be short. Basically, I'm thinking, the 5 speakers, they talk about from different perspectives, okay, arising from the experiences and different sectors. And of course, Subhashini, okay, she talked about the trade policy and told us that told us that Sri Lanka actually has a very heavy reliance on import tariffs as a source of government revenue, which is actually kind of reflective of maybe the deficit in industrial developments. So I'm thinking, I would like to draw, the speakers' focus a little bit closer, okay, a little bit closer to men and women, okay, men and women on the street, okay, or men and women working, working men and women in Hong Kong and of course in the region, okay. Of course, we are interested mostly about Hong Kong working men and women, but not necessarily so, okay. Everybody else, okay. For instance, what do you think from your perspective, okay, how Hong Kong talent, whether professionals or educators or businesses, okay, of course, you focus more on your own expertise, okay, or your own areas. Then what do you think how Hong Kong talents might contribute, for instance, for instance, in the case of Subhashini's, your emphasis on discussion on government policy and the deficit among fiscal deficit. What do you think, Hong Kong's experience have to offer, or maybe Hong Kong professionals might have something to offer, okay, to help with Sri Lanka's to improve in that area, for instance, okay, that is an example. And for the other speakers, your focus on infrastructure or communication infrastructure or the retail part or SMEs, so what do you think, Hong Kong entrepreneurs or Hong Kong young people, Hong Kong professionals, how they can contribute? I think that those are my general questions that I would like you to maybe give some thoughts to. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Linda Lee's questions and comments. Basically, we all want to know, especially how Hong Kong's professional practitioners could contribute to all these business activities in Sri Lanka. So maybe I would like to go for the order of the presentations. So and see if each speaker would like to respond to that remarks. So Sabasini, are you with us? Do you have any things to add on?
Yes, thank you for the question. And yes, I also really enjoyed the presentations. It's always good to hear from the practitioners. I'm an academic, right? So hear the real stories on the ground. So thank you for the opportunity to quickly respond, Linda. Of course, I'm not very familiar with Hong Kong in terms of fiscal management. I'll tell you the opportunities that are there. Where anyone with this kind of talents, if Hong Kong has it, that's great, or any businesses interested in coming to areas. One is, at least in Hong Kong, I'm quite aware of their facilitation of trade, cross-border trade, automation using electronic platforms. There has been enormous interest. Of course, Sri Lanka started its journey of wanting to automate its border agencies long back, as in mid-90s. But to be honest, we have made slow progress. But there is growing interest that, you know, Sri Lanka can't really become a competitive and attractive investment destination, and even for our Sri Lankan businesses to do well, it's very important to bring down the cost and time of having to deal with multiple government agencies in getting various approvals, permits, letters, having to actually physically deal with them and going through these paper-based systems. There is growing frustration among Sri Lankan businesses as well as international businesses who are in Sri Lanka that this needs to be fixed. And this is an area, maybe there are companies that specialize in this kind of facilitation and automation, providing this kind of technology and technical assistance, may be an opportunity. Then secondly, an area on fiscal side that has been, again, significantly, there has been a lot of attention is, of course, on revenue administration. How can we collect taxes more effectively? How can we facilitate people to pay taxes online? How can we facilitate people to register and get registrations, all of this online, and collect fees online? So basically, there is growing interest in improving our revenue administration. And some of these, like you were talking about soft loans, and some of these are funded through foreign assistance. But again, like Peter said, there is also something that you need to, I was talking about public sentiment. There is this growing realization or a growing lobby towards that any of these projects should have local partners. So at least in the current context, that is something to be mindful about. There is a little bit of aversion towards all these projects that come from foreign money being done entirely by foreigners, foreign consultants, taking away all that money and the technical knowledge back to the country without leaving much at home is being something that is discussed and debated here. So anyone coming in, trying to harness local talent, partner with local software companies, we have quite a lot of good talent here, will be most welcome. So these are two areas that I feel there is opportunity, and overall the other one is on e-government, electronic government, right? Going forward, there is interest, and again, you know, are areas that one may want to think about. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sabasini. So, Tisa, do you have anything to add? Especially in your presentation, you talk about the potential of special economic zone, and would you think or have any advice on how Hong Kong elites can tap into that kind of opportunities?
Oh, thanks, Linda. What I want to highlight is the Hambantota port is the only port in Sri Lanka, which is a free port, which has an industrial zone of 300 hectares located inside the port. And this provides tremendous opportunity for industries to be set up within the port with the minimum of hassle. as well as the minimum of logistics requirements. So that is an area where already we have a $300 million investment which has come in. They have started the construction or the site clearing for the factory. It will go into production within the next 18 to 24 months, and we'll be producing around 48,000 TEUs of containers per annum. So this is the kind of investment that we expect. At the same time, there is enough land area for more smaller investments to come in. And the fact that we are inside the port is a tremendous advantage. Plus the fact that once we believe we should be able to fill up our 300 hectares. And then there is this huge land area, which is run by, it's a free zone run by the Board of Investment. So for investors who are looking at an area which is location-wise the best from a supply chain perspective, and also which provides the necessary incentives through the Board of Investment. As already mentioned by Subhashini, we have the necessary talent in Sri Lanka from a skill perspective. If you look at our two projects here in Colombo as well as in Hambantota, the expatriate community is limited to less than 10% because all the skills are available among the Sri Lankans. So that provides a good base for anybody to start in the industry. And also the fact that we are going to be a part and parcel of the BRI, that will provide more connectivity, bring us higher up in the level of the global connectivity index. Right now, the ease of doing business index, there's room for improvement. And I believe the government is on the correct track to improve on that. So for investment side, that's all I could say. But on the building of infrastructure within the port, we are always open for going into joint ventures with international partners. There are collaborative partnerships being discussed right now. And we are on the verge of getting into an agreement with an international player on the bonded logistics side. So that's all from me, but I'm open for any other questions that the panel may have or the audience may have. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tisa. I think if you look at the map, there's no doubt that Sri Lanka is actually, especially Hambantota port, is actually located in a very strategic position. As you compare it with what we had as Hong Kong, and as a port serving, the entire South China area. But then in terms of the development, it's obviously again also that it's quite early. So therefore, as in response to many speakers' remarks, we need to have a long-term vision. So then now we turn to Chris, because you also mentioned a lot of the time that investment in Sri Lanka or this kind of emerging markets needs a very long-term vision and long-term planning. Despite the fact that there are lots of resources, very strategic locations. So then what would you, in response to Linda Lee's questions, to paying specific attention to Hong Kong's role or Hong Kong elites' contributions, how can they do that given this kind of long-term framework in mind?
I respect the general concern made by Linda that what's the opportunity of a Hong Kong professional or some sort of.
I think Chris needs to unmute.
Sorry, you can't hear?
Unmute.
Okay, that's better. Huh? Okay. So I make my response to Linda's general question on how the Hong Kong sort of people can make contribution to this Sri Lanka developing opportunity. I think with additional to what Peter says, some small and middle size enterprises has some room for running his business in a kind of more or less exchange trade. professional, with the field I'm familiar with is construction. I think the consultant company or individual can have some sort of opportunity. As I share with my hero, say that Hong Kong and Sri Lanka have some shared value, and also some sort of base. They are similar, right? We once been occupied by the UK, that they live with the language and also the law, which is quite similar. So and also in my industry, the specification, like what we still use in Hong Kong is a British standard. I think this is similar in Sri Lanka. So like the design, the kind of some sort of professional study is still can be applied to the Sri Lanka region. And well, with the even myself, my experience in Sri Lanka for a few years, my colleague in mainland China, from mainland China, they are, well, I'll not say weak, but not strong in this kind of contract administration. This is also to a certain extent, the language barrier make the running the sort of project sort of execution a bit difficult. Then my team from Hong Kong help a lot on this kind of sector. This is one part I think Hong Kong professional can help. And second is I can see I met the Pricewaterhouse, kind of a company orientated from Hong Kong. I feel he's doing the audit business and financial model. He helped my company trying to get what they call the proposal of the what they call the design, build, and operate and transfer project. This is also for the, well, right now maybe China has been sort of grow a lot in this kind of business model administration. But before that, the Hong Kong company can give some sort of contribution on this formulation of this financial model. And the third is, I think, is some sort of helping to pitch up the mainland China company and the local Sri Lanka company, because Hong Kong enterprise or even the professional know better on the way of administrating the what left by the UK on this kind of I mean this even the political administration. They have similar sort of like the organization structure, like they have the council, district council in the individual zone of Sri Lanka, and the authority and the delegation has been quite close to what we have in Hong Kong. So when we deal with the Sri Lanka officer, government officer, it's more easy to understand each other. I think we get a merit on this. This is all I'm saying.
Thank you for the sharing. So now we turn to Thiru. So I think you have a lot of experience working in Sri Lanka, retailing, recently also have this kind of merger experience. So can you share with us again how you think maybe if there is Hong Kong elite, Hong Kong professional practitioners, how would you think that they can help your business to be even more successful?
Yeah, I think that three of the 5 speakers today, me, Tisa, and Chris, we both have something in common. We are all coming from a very heavy infrastructure perspective. So, we all infrastructure builders in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, obviously we are building the telecom infrastructure. Now, again, I think similar to Chris and Tissa, almost 100% of my network has been built by Chinese companies. Huawei, ZTE, Alibaba, Whale Cloud. So very similar, again, I think like the ports and the other infrastructure. So, we have these major Chinese companies coming in to help us build the telecom infrastructure in here. But this is a short-term, 6 month, 1 year, kind of event where people come in from Hong Kong and China and spend a year here, build the network for us, build the billing systems, build the sites for us, but then they go back. So it's a short-term engagement. It is not a permanent engagement for Sri Lanka. But what I'm saying is that very similar to what Tissa is saying about the port, I think people should look at our infrastructure as a foundation, as a foundation of developing other businesses. Within the business, within my infrastructure company itself, yes, there will be some limited opportunities for people to come and offer various telecom subsystems or other systems that we could use, in providing the service, a telecom service. But for me, what I would suggest more strongly is that I, together with the other mobile operators in Sri Lanka, we built a very strong digital infrastructure. And this digital infrastructure can be a base on which people from Hong Kong can start developing various digital services, e-commerce services, and promote and develop that in Sri Lanka. So it's a foundation for people to use to develop additional incremental ancillary businesses. In terms of the skill set, as I think Subhashini and I think Tissa would have mentioned, is that today Hutch is 100% Sri Lankan staffed company. So we don't have any expatriates in Sri Lanka. It's 100. All my engineers, my sales, my marketing, my finance, all 100% Sri Lankan. So what that means is that it means that we have the talent. We have the talent here on the ground for investors to leverage. As mentioned, Linda, we just went through a very, very complicated network merger. It's probably one of the most complicated network mergers ever attempted anywhere in the world, where you are merging two mobile networks sitting on top of each other, literally. How do you integrate two networks sitting on top of each other? But I'm very proud to say that merger was executed successfully by a 100% local Sri Lankan team. We do not have hundreds of consultants coming in here and advising us how to do it. But my point is this: I think the technical skill set, whether it's in technical, ICT, finance, marketing, etc., is available here on the ground for investors to leverage, to grow and leverage my infrastructure, Tissa's port infrastructure, and Chris's other infrastructure that he's building. Leverage that to develop the new economy. They talk about the new digital economy, the new e-commerce economy. So I think there's opportunity here for people to come here and develop these startups, entrepreneurial activities, and then grow from there. And then, of course, with digital services, it's global. It's not just local. The same services can be offered globally. It's not restricted to the global market, to the local market. So that's my advice, that the talent is here, the infrastructure is here. We should be looking forward to developing the digital economy, e-commerce economy, which I think there is sufficient ground here for people to consider.
Thank you. So it looks like that if Hong Kong practitioners would like to seek an opportunities to play in Sri Lanka, they will have to learn from Peter. So the next speaker that I'm going to turn to, which is to identify a new initiative rather than only thinking of providing existing services, because from all the speakers I heard, they seem to emphasize that there are resources there, their networks are there, and then there are talents already. So on the other hand, it's also makes people feeling comfortable because they are, very mature environment for them to invest. But then the only thing now left is then what to do if you want to, if Hong Kong entrepreneurs or players want to take advantage in this emerging market. So Peter, then what would you advise us?
Sure, I think my team is already. I think my team is already engaging. Now we are working in a digital world. Turi, I think my colleagues is contacting you, Hutchison, because the SIM card for us is very important. Digitalize, even cryptocurrency, payment gateway, everything will be there. And we are facing 5G, a lot of things can be happen. And for me, I just represent entrepreneur, and the whole 40 years or 37 years, my experience is doing business. I'm studying economics. To do a growth is transaction. I mean the real transaction with help. With the port, e-commerce, digitalization, I think there is a lot of opportunity for entrepreneurs, but we have to move. I mean, Hong Kong young people. When I go outside, I didn't see that much people. I mean, from Hong Kong. I see a lot of from China, even from, different part of the world. But Hong Kong company, which I come across, is not that much willing to take risks because of what I say internally. We also consider the same thing because, their bonus, everything is there. So they don't want to take a lot of risks. So understand, because the opportunity calls. But if your style is a lifestyle, you want to have fun, go outside. So this is me. So the whole entrepreneurship is like that. You have to go outside, know more people, and then build up your network and have fun. So that's my contribution, and I left my contact with everyone. Everyone interested can contact my colleagues. We are an accelerator, Fufa Lab. So this is my role.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So it seems that the networking is in the pipeline, that they are already starting to taking this platform to connect with each other, which is something that we are happy to see. And then I think we still have some more time, so we can go back to the questions raised by the participants in the chat box and see if the speakers can answer them. So the first questions was raised by Professor Janek. I think the participants is particularly interested in Sabasini's presentation, that she mentioned that Sri Lanka government actually take more import tax rather than profit tax. So is this a kind of government policy, or is it the result of something that the government cannot control? Sabasini, can you
it's definitely not the government policy. So the problem with Sri Lanka's revenue collection that has been highlighted and identified has been that 80% of Sri Lanka's government tax revenue comes from consumption-based taxes. And that's why you have import taxes. So it's very important to make a distinction. It has both the trade taxes and domestic taxes collected on imports. Basically, even the tax base, what is really important there is tax base is heavily import driven, right? So it has a share of about 20-25% entirely exclusively trade taxes, and then the balance coming from domestic taxes collected on imports. But it's a very narrow base that shows that it's a problem Sri Lanka has identified for a long time, that Sri Lanka has a very narrow tax base. And there has been, like I said, multiple attempts to address that problem through IMF arrangements as well. The last arrangement also really focused exclusively on addressing the revenue problem. So we have 80% of tax revenue coming from consumption-based taxes. That includes trade taxes plus taxes like value-added taxes. and then only about 20% coming from income taxes or profit-based taxes. So there has been a long-term goal from the government, a lot of economic policies that says we should change this to 60-40, whereas 60% revenue should ideally come from consumption-based taxes and 40 to be driven by income-based taxes. But this has been somehow a transition the country has struggled to achieve within maybe a lot of political economic factors at play that undermine, that taxation and tax policy is never a popular policy to pursue for any government. And really getting the public buy-in to actually change this and creating sufficient awareness among the public of the value of it, and reducing tax evasion and bringing these high income earners into the tax net has been challenges that the country has faced. Definitely not the policy of the government. It has somehow ended up like that, despite like many academic research that really identified the problem, and a lot of advice from local and international experts on fiscal policy on different things. Unfortunately, it has reforms have not come through as one would expect, and it has been politically challenging, and the political economic factors has not been very helpful.
Thank you very much. I think it's kind of a problem that has been faced by lots of the developing countries when they want to protect their domestic industry by having this import tax. Yet the problem is how to also nurture the industry sectors to grow so that they can export, and then the government can also earn from export kind of profit oriented tax. So that is, I think, again, a long-term policy that the Sri Lanka government will have to work on. So we have the second questions from Angela, who asks about whether there are any opportunities for people who want to explore the markets of providing education or training services in Sri Lanka. That I totally don't know. And would any speaker or other participants have any idea of that? Is there so although
there is, I may be happy to say there is very high demand. It depends on, but you need to also understand that if you're going into be a higher education institute that provides degrees on your own, it is challenging. But otherwise, there is very high demand for international accredited courses in Sri Lanka. There are many that, of course, there is, Sri Lankans have a preference for UK, Australian, Canadian, American degrees and qualifications. So you may have heard that Sri Lanka has the largest number of CIMA. This is a UK accountancy professional qualification, that Sri Lanka has this, the largest CIMA qualified accountants outside UK. And this is one of the reasons HSBC decided to have their back-end office in Sri Lanka, because Sri Lankan accountants are highly sought after. And in many countries, it is very easy for Sri Lankan accountants to get citizenship. You will find in Australia, Canada, many accountants migrating because they're considered high quality. So that just is a one indication. But I know, like most of, there are many in my office who are qualified London School of Economics graduates. These are correspondence courses that, they basically learn in Sri Lanka and take the exams. And these are very popular. Increasingly, young people are opting out of government education system, and there is an international education system that is coming up even at the school level. There is very high demand for that type of education. So definitely, but I guess you may have to, and even on technical education, for example, Japan and Germany, I guess, has a higher acceptance, level of acceptance, especially Germany in terms of technical and vocational education qualifications. So it's about, again, the public perception and acceptance. So it's a little bit more heavily biased towards Western education and qualifications. So maybe it's a challenge for, it depends on what qualifications and how much you can convince the Sri Lankans that that qualification is useful and valuable, which they would pay for. So the current trend is still very much Western driven.
Thank you. Thank you. So there are demands. So we have another participant who want to respond, Alan.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, great. Yeah, although I've never been to Sri Lanka before, but like I do have a very solid relationship with the people from Sri Lanka. Yeah, because today I represent the CMA Australia, one of the cooperative organizations as well. In fact, our CEO, who is the one who raised the first question here, the Professor Janet, and he's the CEO of the CMA from Australia. In fact, he's the one from Sri Lanka. And that's why I know him for a long, long time. And that's why I like that about the education system. I believe like the Sri Lanka is one of the best places for us to develop all kind of the articulation with some overseas university as well. But before I go into more, I would like to ask some of the program, some of the issue as well. Yeah, talking about the talents program. Yeah, since we're talking about professional, I know like well from Australia, there's a new recently set up a distinguished talents program for the people which is as a professional to migrate to Australia, and also even though from some of the ASEAN country, for example, the Malaysia, they also have an MM2 program as well. In fact, now I wonder like for the Sri Lanka, for the government, do they consider to have this kind of the talents program for the people which is like want to go overseas to stay in the Sri Lanka, and also what kind of the international school which is can be eligible for their children, because normally as a professional want to migrate or also want to work overseas, and probably with the age of 40 and 40 and above, and then like their children probably well just about the time for them to go to the school or even the university as well. In that case, like I know in Sri Lanka, there's about 16 university, but what kind of the requirement well will be for those kind of the people which is from the overseas to go into their university system as well. Since I'm the problem child, and that's why a couple of the questions I want to raise as well. Now, talking about since like we are talking about the investment, we have to identify what kind of the skills we are looking for. Yeah, because like in the new aspect, like for the what we call the SME is kind of totally different kind of the aspect right now. Yeah, because like normally like great difficulties for us to identify what is the value of the SME. Yeah, but like I believe like probably we can just use the simple benchmark like if they are not listing company, then we treat it as a SME at this stage at the beginning. But like they're talking about in China, well, the new scale of the ratio of the identifier of the SME, even though their company value of the more than 100 billion Hong Kong dollar RMB is still treated as a SME. Yeah, because I believe like the for the information we have been well, we did a couple of days ago, a couple of weeks ago, talking about the penalty of the Alibaba. Like you talk about 180 billion dollars, but like it's only just about 4% of their last sales for last year. So in that case, like what depends like for the government point of view, kind of the industry or what kind of the scale of the company they're looking for, and this is very crucial for the investor in order to before they are making their long-term plan.
Okay, so we have answers and questions, but then the answers actually leads to questions, meaning that they Alan want to ask what kind of skills actually Sri Lanka needs. Okay, so do our speakers in Sri Lanka have good answers for that? What do you think that what kind of skill that is required, and then we can actually provide that kind of training in Sri Lanka? Do you have particular kind of request or demand on particular skills?
So there is preferences among the students and parents, right? Which are problematic. Maybe Fisa will agree. Sometime I've heard logistics and maritime people often say that there is a mismatch between the Sri Lankan economy and the preferences of students and parents, because especially sectors like maritime, logistics, and tourism are high potential in Sri Lanka. But if you look at the preferences of parents and students, or even the awareness about starting a career in these paths, tend to be low. So there is a mismatch between demand and supply in Sri Lanka, and also preferences. So there is very high level of preference in Sri Lanka for medicine. Maybe that's why there are lots of students who go to China even for their medical degrees from Sri Lanka. And there is very high level of preference for engineering and IT sectors. But if you ask for maritime, logistics, and tourism, you don't see, parents or students, really thinking of having a high demand. But there is attempts by the industry, both the tourism and the logistics sector, trying very hard to introduce these courses at school level, at university level. For a long time, these have not been even in the curriculum. So I think the industry is working hard to get them more recognized, even on technical and vocational education path. So I think that is where the challenge is. So demand is very much there for medicine, engineering, legal, definitely lawyers. Of course, they get educated in Sri Lanka than outside, but IT fields.
Okay. So
if I can just, if I can add from what little knowledge I have, I think, Sri Lanka has historically always been a seat of learning, going back 50, 100 years, long before other countries in the Asian region developed. Sri Lanka had a history of being a center of learning. And I think today, as was mentioned by Subhashini, the general population here are very literate, and they're very hungry for education. I think I have worked in other countries around the region and globally, but I think Sri Lanka is quite unique, where the people here are really looking to learn and educate. So there's a demand and a thirst for learning, and so this represents an opportunity. And the demand I think it's across the board. So I think it's not any specific industry sector, accountancy or engineering, but generally I think across the board, if the opportunity is presented, in terms of you can get a career in maritime or whatever, if the opportunity is presented, I'm sure there are people in Sri Lanka who would be interested to take up the opportunity if they knew that that opportunity existed. So I think my general point is that Sri Lanka is has a very high potential, for development of education services, and I think that could be definitely an area that could be developed by Hong Kong professionals in setting up various educational institutes or seats of learning and offering courses to the people here.
yeah, we also have this questions in the chat box from mentioning about that academics are facing challenges in acquiring foreign scholarships. I think also then the formal kind of undergraduate or postgrad educations might also have a kind of market in Sri Lanka. So maybe we can.
I think like most maybe like in Sri Lanka, we have to understand the formal university system is government run. Mm-hmm. So being essentially a government run sector, the opportunities for foreign scholarships may be not very they will be very limited, frankly. It's not like the US or Australia or UK, So, but I think the development of the private sector educational network gives opportunities for education professionals to engage there, but not in the formal university scholarship kind of role. someone mentioned earlier about, even down from, from international school, from international school, there's a well-established international school network here in Sri Lanka. There are foreign teachers here teaching at these international schools. So that's opportunities there. But then going into the more tertiary area, I think it's more the private sector. So where you have private sector institutions being established, there's where the opportunities could be for professionals to come and engage there and develop themselves.
Okay, so let's move on to a different questions. In the chat box, we have a questions raised by Brad, talking about if there are any disputes between business partners or even between business partner and government, what can you do? So is there any experience could be shared by the speakers? Have you ever encountered this kind of problem in dealing with disputes?
Maybe I can echo
Yeah.
on this.
Yeah, please.
Although this in the contract, the dispute can be referred to the arbitration, but most of the time the dispute will be handled by the negotiation by a third party who know the what we say the dispute. Usually that dispute we involve is the contract work for the governments, those are arising from the commercial side. The way my experience is that you're not Sri Lanka sort of like the employer side not willing to bring direct to the very formal dispute resolution sort of the approach like arbitration or even the court. We know the way to move forward too. We ask a local sort of what do you call the mediator, or quite a famous organization or company, I can say simply, that be a lobby to try to close the gap between parties. It's found quite sometimes quite successful eventually. Say China Harbour never bring any dispute case to the court during our business in Sri Lanka for that long years. So that's my experience in Sri Lanka. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So we are running out of time unless if speakers has experience on this dispute problem that would like to provide.
Just a quick comment. Linda. For major, I don't know about small investments, but maybe what's the name? Peter can answer. But for major investments in contracts that we do, normally we kind of look for a neutral country for arbitration, like Singapore. So Singapore is listed as the country of arbitration, so it's neutral for both parties. So, but maybe that's applicable for larger investments, not for small investments.
And I can share a little bit.
Sure. Is your mic on?
Yes. What sometimes about our cooperation, as I said, the local law. So I will invite my local Sri Lankan partner, if he can, we set up a company in Hong Kong, right? To go further for the investment. So this is one of the way to get away from the dispute.
Okay. All suggestions pointing to a soft way to resolve any disputes rather than bring it to the court. So thank you all for the advice and comments and presentations and questions. It has been a wonderful and fruitful morning. So I think we need to call it an end of the section. And before that, I would like to share with you our information of our next workshop. Okay, so This is the second workshop on Sri Lanka. Then we will have our third workshop on Vietnam, which has been scheduled for 11th June 2021 in the morning, 10 to 1 p.m. So if you are free and if you are interested, and if you learn something from today's workshop, I encourage you to either scan the QR code or follow the links to register now. And we will also have 3 more workshops in Malaysia, Belarus, and Djibouti, and also Myanmar in the second half of the year. And then lastly, we'll have a closing forum. And for each workshop, we will all provide a training pack for participants, which I think would help you to understand the country in a better way. So I think, and lastly, before we end, we have a feedback survey. This is a few questions for you to answer in order for us to know better about your ideas and views about the workshop. Please go through the links or scan the QR code to answer the questions, quick questions, and provide us feedback on this workshop. Thank you very much again, and also thank you for the speakers. Final points to note. Both links mentioned above will be sent to you again by email, so you don't need to be very hurried to do that, but please do that after the workshop. Please also join our contact exchange platform. Some of you have already exchanged some kind of idea through the chat box, so please continue and join this exchange platform. Speakers' PowerPoints and workshop summary will be shared, but not the recording. It will be shared on our website, CSHK website, when they are available. So stay tuned and stay in touch. I look forward to see you all in our next workshop. Thank you and bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Well,
Thank you, bye-bye.
Extend special thanks to all our speakers. Okay, and then we hope to see you very soon. Okay, join our next workshop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Linda. Bye-bye.